This is Dr. Jerome Corsi, and today is Wednesday. It's August 30th, 2023. Thank you for joining us at thetruthcentral.com. We're doing podcasts every weekday. First story. There's a couple of big stories breaking now about Biden, and the first one I want to cover is that the National Archives has reported now there's been some FOIA activity. And in response to a 2022 FOIA request by the Southeastern Legal Foundation, the National Archives have admitted it has in possession nearly 5,400 emails, electronic records, and documents that potentially show President Biden using a pseudonym, false name, during his vice presidency. Okay, so this signals that he was using the accounts of calling himself Robert Ware, Robert L. Peters, J.R.B. Ware, pseudonyms the 80-year-old president was known to use in the White House during his time as Obama's vice president. And again, this is very, very suspicious, because people who use pseudonyms and conducting business like this are hiding things. And what Biden is hiding is corruption. He's hiding selling his office. He's hiding allowing his son, Hunter Biden, to get big contracts because Joe Biden can influence public policy and sell out the United States for money. I'll get Hunter Biden with his Seneca Rosemont investment firm, take money from China, and they buy things in the United States like firms that produce stealth technology, thereby giving to China U.S. military secrets. These are treasonous acts. And the revelation that there's 5,400 different instances where he is used in electronic emails, various electronic records and documents. He's trying to mask that he's the vice president by using these pseudonyms is extremely suspicious. And the noose is tightening around Biden, and I don't think the Democrats are going to be able to stop it this time, nor do I think they want to stop it, because I think they know that with Biden they've now got a liability. American people are catching on. Now, there's another story I want to also highlight here, and that is that the Conservative Heritage Foundation in Washington has released a 1,000-page document. And what it's calling for is a 2004 election plan for a possible second White House term for Donald Trump. And it has to do, it's called Project 2025. It's a handbook. And they want to get an army of Republicans behind this to have the civic infrastructure in place on day one to reshape the bureaucracy by firing as many as 50,000 federal workers. Now, I think this is a good idea. And I think it's important that we get an army of Americans who say this bureaucracy is completely out of control. Got the EPA mandating that we're going to have by 2030 or 2035, 80% of all vehicles are going to be electric, which is ridiculous. We don't have the infrastructure for them. They don't work particularly well. The inventory of electric vehicles is growing on lots because people realize that they don't want them. They're dead ducks. They're albatross. They're kind of a novelty. And there's an initial group of buyers who are leftists and said, oh boy, we're saving the environment. It's nonsense. And to go to a less effective technology on a hoax of climate change is absolute lunacy. Now, my solution to the bureaucracy is move the entire federal bureaucracy to Death Valley. Their civil service, if they want the jobs, they can move. We can pay their relocation. And Death Valley is a little bit warm in the summer, so they can have all the wind and solar they want. And they can generate their own electricity. and they can cool themselves however they figure out they want to. If they don't want to move, I don't care. I would shut down the bureaucracy by department, fire the entire Department of Education, close it. Once it's closed, everybody loses their jobs. And this bureaucracy is poison. It's lethal. It's got a leftist agenda. Obama had packed it with leftists. It's like the federal judiciary with all these leftist judges, including this Marxist judge who is conducting the trial in Georgia against Donald Trump. We have here a group of neo-Marxists who are controlling America and want to destroy it. And the steps being taken, including this gender insanity, are conscious efforts to destroy America. We're going to get to that theme a little bit more and develop it a little more effectively throughout this broadcast. But I'm going to cover some issues, very important issues in climate change. There are some major developments in climate change. I'm going to cover them in this broadcast. And then we're going to end up with some things I want to cover about the lies going on entirely about the forest fires, etc., and how much we are destroying the climate change is not causing all these fires. They're arson. One more point on the Biden story. It's being reported in a Daily Mail. London was reporting that they've obtained emails, and the story we link to gives you the emails. These are very damaging emails. More and more damaging materials coming out about Biden that is really linking together Biden and the criminal schemes. What these emails show is that Hunter Biden recruited a Democratic law firm, which was this firm that David Boies was heading, in order to influence Ukraine to develop information so that the Ukrainians, Poroshenko, who was then president, would fire Shokin, who was the investigator who was looking into Burisma, and of course Hunter Biden's and the Biden family tie to that, together with the owner of Burisma, who's a guy named Zalchevsky, who was under investigation for corruption in Ukraine, and Shokin was leading the investigation. Now, these emails make it very clear, and by the way, the firm Boies, Schiller, and Flexner, David Boies, if you remember, in 2000 was the lead counsel for Al Gore when he was pressing that the Florida recount was fraudulent and the election should be swung to Al Gore. In 2000, when the Democrats objected to an election being fraudulent, they were not put in prison for subversion. Only as I think we're seeing from Tucker Carlson, who is now in Hungary doing some brilliant interviews, that the reality is that only communists or Nazis, which are also leftist fascists, imprison their political enemies. And that's where the United States is going. If we allow the Department of Justice to do political prosecutions because they want to imprison Donald Trump, who clearly is the leading candidate across the board for the 2024 election, and may also have won the 2020 election if we could ever get a legitimate investigation into the issues. And I think these nutcases in the Department of Justice, leftist, neo-Marxist, cultural Maoists, whose aim is anarchy, who indicted Donald Trump, indictment after indictment after indictment, have given Donald Trump a platform in which he and Sidney Powell, who pleaded not guilty yesterday in Georgia, can lay out the facts. And they can litigate the 2020 election as we go into the 2024 election, and they can show the fraud. They can bring issues that can come into court cases that ultimately the Supreme Court's going to have to hear. Because the Constitution, if we care about the Constitution anymore at all, says that only the state legislatures can formulate the rules for presidential elections. And what the states did in 2020 through this scamdemic of COVID-19 was they locked everything down and they said, well, we have to have mail-in ballots. Well, mail-in ballots are inherently designed for fraud, especially this harvesting, where you can have drop-off ballots and people just drop off and you collect them and you don't check the names. It's an inherently fraudulent scheme. And as such, it should be banned if it isn't tightly controlled. The traditional way of mail-in ballots, where you had to go into to the Board of Elections, you had to register, you had to sign, you had to go through all kinds of conditions to prove you were a voter. You got a ballot, you had to return that ballot. Your signatures had to check. It was a very tight procedure. Under that kind of control, it's okay. But just mail-in ballots, well, middle of the night, we just bring in 60,000 ballots and don't allow you to challenge them. Inherently fraudulent. These things are now going to get litigated, and Donald Trump has got a case that he can press in the American public. I think the left has finally stepped on their own selves. Chris, you want to comment?
Well, as far as Trump's concerned, that's what you get for investigating corruption in Washington. You're an outsider, you're calling up, you're trying to get a couple of things exposed. All of a sudden, everybody turns against you. You're right, though. At this point, with all this prosecution against, I'll say persecution against Donald Trump, the idea of trying to deplete his resources and his associates' resources, they have opened the floodgates to, and you've pointed this out in past episodes, to investigate the 2020 election, to look at how elections are taken care of, and look into ballot harvesting, which does happen. In 2018, let's just say the Georgia's election denying gubernatorial candidate Stacey Abrams, she had people out moving and harvesting votes, and that didn't work well enough. 2020, the rules had to be changed. Some of these states are going to keep those COVID rules for 2024. So here's what happens. You have these ballots being mailed to people's houses. They wouldn't even go out and bother anyway. Maybe they're playing games. Maybe they're staying home. They're not even bothering. Somebody knocks on their door. Well, if you're locked down, you're home. You got your ballot. I'll take care of it for you. Mark this off. He's our guy. We'll take care of this. We're going to end all this for you. And all of a sudden, they'll be happy with it. Even today, there'll be enough people sitting home where harvesters will knock on doors, take the ballot and say, don't worry about it. I'll take it for you. If you're voting for the other guy, I'm pretty sure those ballots are going to get lost. If you're voting for their guy, those ballots will be found. Hey, it's speculation, but this is how the rules are set up.
Well, let's have a legitimate investigation. I think now we've got the stage set to get it. And thank you, Georgia. If this Marxist judge doesn't allow Donald Trump to present evidence, the American people are going to see what political justice looks like. And I think the American people are getting sick and tired of transgenders in the schools. And when September starts and the stock market, which I believe could lose a third of its value when we get into the fall. And I've written this book on the coming global crash, which is starting to happen, and the gold rush, this incredible gold rush that's about to happen. And by the way, if you look at the homepage, you can get this free by calling the 800 number. It's called that 800 number. You can get the book free. It's right on the homepage. And Chris will show you exactly how to find it, how to locate it. You can see it right there. Chris is highlighting the number. Call and get the book free. Read it. We're in a desperate situation. You better be prepared for knowing what's going to happen, because it's going to be a cataclysmic downturn of the market. And I don't think it's stoppable with the amount of debt there is in the world. Okay, let's continue. I want to cover some climate change stories because there's some very big news out in climate change. And the first story I want to cover has to do with this report that has just been issued. It's 1,600 climate scientists, including 2 Nobel laureates, have published a report. It's a declaration. It's put together by the Global Climate Intelligence Group, which is CLINTEL, CLINTEL. And it's an independent foundation that operates in the fields of climate change and climate policy. It was founded in 2019 by Emeritus Professor of Geophysics Gus Burkhout and science journalist Michael Cook. Okay, so the 1,600 scientists who signed this declaration include 2 Nobel laureates. The most recent to sign is the Nobel Prize winner, Dr. John Clauser, who won the 2022 Nobel Prize in Physics. And he signed this saying that the misguided climate scientist has metastasized into massive shock journalism pseudoscience. In turn, the pseudoscience has become a scapegoat for a wide variety of other unrelated ills. It is promoted and extended by similarly misguided business marketing agents, politicians, journalists, government agencies, and environmentalists. The underlying report that endangered the declaration lays out a series of statements challenging many of the common climate claims. For instance, one of the most common claims, repeated without question by many, is that the Earth will soon pass tipping points that will lead to catastrophic environmental damage, including dangerous sea rise levels, entire species going extinct, and even greater suffering in many nations. All these are shown to be false, like Al Gore's predictions. Now, this report's a very important report. And by the way, I have a copy of it right here. You can see I ordered a copy of it, and it is a extremely good report. I'm going to be writing about this and focusing on it. It's well done. It's got a lot of data in it, a lot of conclusions in it, but it is fundamentally a report saying that the climate hysteria is absolute nonsense, and that the IPCC, which is the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the United Nations Climate Change Alarmist Group, completed its sixth assessment in 2023, and they declared that global warming of 1.5% Celsius would lead to, we have to control this, only 1.5 degrees Celsius warmer than the start of the Industrial Revolution. They blame increase in Earth's temperatures on the Industrial Revolution and the burning of hydrocarbon fuels. Now, this is a very important report, and here's 1,600 scientists who disagree. So the idea there's a consensus that global warming is happening is completely, which we're going to say here is nonsense. Now, I want to play a clip from a climate scientist. This guy is named Ian Plimer, Plimer. I have his book, which is called Heaven and Earth. You can see it right there. And he's from the School of Earth and Environmental Sciences at the University of Adelaide in Australia. And what he's saying in the book is that climate, sea level, and ice sheets have always changed. And the changes observed today are less than those of the past. Climate changes are cyclical and are driven by the Earth's position in the galaxy, the sun, wobbles in the Earth's orbit, ocean currents, and plate tectonics. In previous times, atmospheric carbon dioxide was far higher than at present, but did not drive climate change. No runaway greenhouse gas effect or acid oceans occurred during times of excessively high carbon dioxide. During past glaciations, carbon dioxide was higher than it is today. The non-scientific popular political view is that humans change climate. We have reason for concern about possible human-induced climate change, and in this book's 504 pages and over 2,300 references to peer-reviewed scientific literature and other authoritative sources, he's able to demonstrate that human beings have a minor effect on Earth's climate. This is a legitimate climate scientist, and I want to play a clip that he has just given of a new book he's coming out with. I quote this book extensively in my book on the truth about energy, global warming, and climate change, exposing climate lies in an age of disinformation. I think this guy is a extremely credible, highly intelligent climate scientist, and he is correcting the propaganda and lies you're getting fed by the media. Chris, can we play the clip, please?
It's got nothing to do with the environment. It's got nothing to do with climate. It's all about power by unelected people and all about money. And they are attacking your freedoms. They are attacking our environment. They're attacking your wallet. They're taking the money from the poor and giving it to the rich. So this is what we're up against. We're up against those who lie. We're up against those who are fraudulent and cook the books. So why do I write books like Green Murder? Well, that's exactly what it is. Green policies lead to people dying. Imagine this winter in England if you're a pensioner. You can afford perhaps to heat one room, perhaps to have a hot meal, and perhaps to have a warm shower, but you can't have all three. Now, this is a great country that's been destroyed by green policies. We are killing people with green policies. But we have to fight. And you have to fight with facts, and we have to fight much harder than we've ever fought. It's not the climate that's being threatened. It's the future of our children. And what we're facing is a 50-year dumbing down of our education system where our children cannot realise that they've been taught codswallop. They haven't been given the skills of argument, of critical analysis and thinking, and they are having their futures slaughtered. It is time to fight. You have to have your facts. And you have to be able to fight fire with fire. And if you can't, then ask a really simple question. If someone says, oh, this is the worst floods we've ever had, then all you've got to say is, well, that's interesting. Please show me the evidence. This is all based on evidence, not propaganda, and not feelings. So it is time to fight, and it's time not to let one word or sentence proceed in a discussion without you standing up and fighting. That's why I write books, to give you the tools for fighting, because we're all in this together. Thank you.
I think one of his great points is that there's two great points he's making. Number one is we have to beat this propaganda, this lie about carbon dioxide being the turning knob, the temperature knob of Earth, the control knob of Earth's temperature is nonsense with facts. And that's why I'm doing these books. First one is the truth about energy, global warming, climate change. The second one was about to come out about neo-Marxism, cultural Maoism, and anarchy. And the covers of them are designed. There'll be a third book, which I'll be writing this year, which is about the truth about transhumanism. And the books are designed to look alike. They're part of the Great Awakening trilogy. And the point is, they are lying about climate. And the reason they're lying about it is because of how this neo-Marxism and cultural Maoism, designed to produce anarchy, has taken over the popular culture of America and the world. And these people are controlling Justice Department. They have to be fought. They have to be fought with truth. And we've got to make sure our children are educated, because if we raise another generation that's allowed to be indoctrinated into Marxism, we have no future of freedom in this country. Now, for those who are my age, we've enjoyed freedom for many, many decades. And it's our obligation to the future to fight this battle and to make it clear. And I for a while thought I could retire. At that time, my wife wanted me to retire because of the Mueller investigation. I was immediately targeted because they thought I had a tie to Julian Assange and the Russian collusion investigation. In fact, they threatened to indict me. They gave me a plea deal. I rejected the plea deal, and they did not indict me. They were the liars, not me. The Department of Justice is corrupt. And we've got to, it's part of the first theme I had, which is move the entire Justice Department to Death Valley. See how many people want to work there. Give them wind and solar for their energy. See how they like it. Let's get rid of the bureaucracy. We don't need it, especially not if it's communist, neo-Marxist, cultural Maoist, and aim to destroy America. We've raised a generation who's been taught in the schools to hate America and to question their own gender. This is insanity. Okay, now the arguments and logic for climate change, if we really begin to explore it, and I posted a number of articles here today, and I want to cover a couple more of them because it is, I think the lies you're being told are absolutely incredible. Second article here, the Associated Press is covering this story, which is that they looked at who's funding reporters covering climate change, race, this democracy. We got to have democracy. We have to have mail-in ballots for democracy. We have to allow anybody to vote who wants to vote. This Ida B. Wells Society, which was founded by the 1619 Project and lightning rod Hannah Jones, teamed up with filmmaker Steven Spielberg's Hearthland Foundation to foster, quote, more inclusive storytelling, about climate change. It's all being funded by leftist organizations. So the Associated Press is also taking nonprofit money to fund coverage of race and climate. The organization's the Associated Press Democracy Journalism Initiative, a division whose reporters cover the, quote, intersection of race and voting. I love this intersectionality, is bankrolled by the nonprofits such as the Jonathan Logan Family Foundation. The organization also funds Stacey Abrams' New Georgia Project and the left-wing activist group Take Back the Courts, which advocates expanding the Supreme Court. So a recent Associated Press article on the topic says that the Supreme Court, in a 2013 landmark decision, tossed the heart out of the Voting Rights Act, when in reality the court ruled that 9 southern states would no longer have to, quote, pre-clear election law changes with the federal government. The AP lamented in another story that the far-right conservatives in Tennessee were elected to city council seats. The AP news report said that the GOP election tactics intentionally disenfranchised black voters in Wisconsin. Okay, so the Associated Press is getting funded to develop these stories. And they're pointing out the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation spent $2.5 million on the Associated Press climate and education reporting verticals and sent $400,000 to its democracy journalism project. AP Foundation also funds Planned Parenthood and organizations such as the Advocates for Youth, which promotes transgender ideology, to kindergartners. A lot of money pouring into destroying America. And again, these foundations need to be exposed. The tie to journalism needs to be exposed, because this is an extension of what the CIA was doing in Operation Mockingbird, going back to the 1950s, paying prominent journalists, including some of the best known of the era, in order to advance CIA propaganda, lies, as truth. Chris, do you want to comment on this?
And the funny thing is, the media just marches in a lockstep behind it. It used to be we'd have a media that would investigate. It used to be we had what was the word? Skeptical media, if you will. When the government puts out information, even when a community puts out information, a science or well-funded scientific community would put out information, we used to have journalists who would figure out who was funding this, mention it, and discuss it. We used to have that. Right now, it's all propaganda. It's all pushing the climate change agenda, despite who's funding it, and denouncing anybody who challenges that initiative. That, of course, if I remember correctly, and I did take some journalism in school. That was my minor in college. I remember that is not a principle of journalism. You have to investigate, find out for sure. It's almost like in theory, it's almost like the scientific method, but it's not being taken care of here.
The scientific method needs to be taught again. In other words, you've got to understand fundamental principles of mathematics, fundamental chemistry, fundamental physics. You've got to understand a little history. First of all, you got to learn how to read. I think one of the reasons our culture is falling apart, people don't read books anymore. You've got to read books.
And the scientific method does not apply to a lot of this client junk science. That's why it's called junk science, by the way, because in the examples we're given over the years, there is no proof via the scientific method. of any of these climate change theories. That's another issue. And as you pointed out in several programs in the past, to make their point, valuable information had been omitted.
Yeah, I mean, they Michael Mann with his hockey puck nonsense saying the Earth
Hockey puck.
only gained temperature because of the Industrial Revolution. He omitted things like the Little Ice Age in the 1700s. He omitted the medieval warming period.
Little Don Rickles in there.
Yeah. Well, look, the Earth is 4.6 billion years old. For 80% of Earth's history, there's nothing on the surface of the Earth. 600 million years ago, there was much more carbon dioxide parts per million in the atmosphere than there is today. Carbon dioxide follow global warming. They don't cause it. There's a lot of legitimate science which shows that the way the Earth goes around the sun, when it gets more elliptical, more egg-shaped, which it does about every 100,000 years, we have an ice age. That's not caused by carbon dioxide. The carbon dioxide theory is global warming is actually kind of silly. It's very, very minor carbon dioxide as a global warming effect. 70% of all global warming, the climate change activists don't want you to know, is water vapor. That's the most effective greenhouse gas. 70% of all greenhouse gases are water vapor, not carbon dioxide.
I'm going to submit this to you. This is where you get a little too complicated for them. It's easy to say, hey, it's getting warmer. That means global warming. It's difficult to explain concepts of science, elements, and compounds that put themselves together and cause certain situations and certain conditions. But it's too hard for people to sit down and read and look at in the age of shorts, in the age of TikTok, and of course, even before that, in the age of quick 30-minute programs.
Well, people have got to start reading again. And if we want to beat this agenda, we've got to take it seriously. Otherwise, we're going to lose this country. And this country will be marched into slavery. This is now, anarchy will be the result. We see anarchies developing in our cities like San Francisco or Baltimore or Chicago or Detroit. I saw a story this morning, even Yale in New Haven. It's not safe. These are Democratic controlled hellholes, and they're not safe. This is something we've got to realize and we've got to understand is not going to be easily controlled unless we take steps to control it.
I didn't get.
And so let's make sure we take steps to control it by reading and thinking. Now, we're going to revamp the website. We're going to start my telemedicine programs, and we're going to start getting them going. Please take a look at our sponsors, especially My Vital C. We're going to launch a program in September called GetLongevityMeds.com. It will be on the website. My Vital C, which I've been taking now for 4 years, is a remarkable molecule. It's carbon 60, which I've written a book on. It's called Live Longer and Better. That's going to be featured on the website. It's coming. It's coming very quickly. Our last story today, this Greek wildfires, which were said to be climate change. Everything's climate change. The sun comes up in the morning, climate change. Okay, so they are now found that there were 79 people who were arrested for arson, starting these fires. The left, I'm convinced, are starting fires or letting the conditions develop where, like in Maui, where the electricity and the management of these, these wild, masses of land were not properly managed, and electrical wires were able to be not properly maintained, and therefore the fires started because of the negligence of a climate change bureaucracy in the Hawaiian leftist government, blamed on climate change. And so again, as the stories really get developed, we're finding here that there are a lot of arsonists, hundreds and hundreds of artists who are, basically committing a crime against the country. They're threatening fires and destroying property and human lives, all to advance the idea that climate change and heat waves are causing the boiling of the earth and that we need to have less hydrocarbon fuels being used in order to control wildfires. Well, people, if these left lunatics would stop setting the fires, the earth has a natural cycle in the summer of fires in forests and, these large grasslands that are largely natural. They traditionally have fires as part of the Earth's management of fires, the recycling of the nutrients in a forest needed to produce a new batch of trees. It's understood by the principles of forestry. And again, that requires study. It requires understanding the science. It requires understanding the math, the physics, the biology, the chemistry. And again, if we don't educate people on these things, all they're taught is climate change and racism, we're going to be generation, have dumb and dumber will be the nature of our generations to come on, and they'll easily be marched into slavery. Our children will become neo-Marxist, cultural Maoists, like the Cultural Revolution in China, and the end result will be famine. Millions of people will be killed. That's Plimner's idea, and he's right. That's why he's doing Green Murder, his next book. I've just ordered a copy of it yesterday. So what our whole theme is, and the whole point, of course, this whole The Truth Central is the truth. And we'll continue broadcasting the truth. In the end, God always wins. God will win here too. I think it's necessary for us to join the battle. That's why I'm not retired. I'm going to be very active writing books and developing projects and working on this full time to try to turn the situation around. I'm going to get down on my knees and following the instructions of 2 Chronicles 7:14. I'm going to ask God to forgive me and others joining me for allowing God to be taken out of the schools, out of the public square, millions of babies to be killed in the womb. These were sins against God. And I'm going to beg for forgiveness. God will hear the prayer and God will save our land. That's the recourse, I think, that we must take spiritually, because this is a spiritual war. And the neo-Marxists know it, and they're fighting for the other side. God will win. Let's do our part. We'll be back every weekday. We'll be back tomorrow. The Truth Central. Thank you for joining us. God bless.